I will call this meeting sort of to order. We are at the home of Rabbi Adam Gindia. This is the home of Base Miami. Adam will explain in a moment or two what Base is. I see that we have Susan Gulak on screen. She is the chairperson of the National Chavarot Committee. One of the important
Look for email.
And we're going to mute everybody. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Go to participants and mute them. We will.
I got it. You keep talking. I'm going to figure this
out. I can talk. Okay. And Beth David is also a participant in this. But the host organization is the Center for Jewish Life here in Miami. The Center for Jewish Life will be a $50, $60, $70 million project to be erected on what is at the moment the property of Beth David congregation here in Miami. Beth David is a 120-year-old conservative congregation, and the buildings have eroded, and they're all going to come down. And in their place, there will be a center that will include schools. Beth David does have a Jewish day school and a program for children on the autistic spectrum, and a preschool. It does have, obviously, a synagogue and a congregation that will be located within the new center, and along with what those elements you find in Jewish community centers. But it will all be purpose-built for the new paradigm. Stop and consider what that means. That physical walls are now porous. That programs that used to take place in centers, you don't need a center for anymore. This is a hybrid program. We've invited people to come here physically. I used to sit around the table at Beth David with 10, 12, 15, 20 people who would drive downtown Miami in order to be at Beth David physically. And they would come and they would learn for an hour and a half, and then drive home. And once COVID hit and we went to Zoom, people seem reluctant to come physically. I mean, they can simply show up there in little boxes. And also from out of county, from any time zone, we have several time zones here, and from any country for that matter. So we have, over the months, acquired a list of people from all the time zones of the continent. And amazingly, it forms a community. People begin to recognize each other and care for each other from one Zoom box to the next. This is an astonishment. Whatever we do, whatever we do now, whatever we create has to take all of this into consideration. Now, one of the institutions that will be on the center is something that is referred to as an atrium. An atrium will be a major part of the physical structure. We have a prize-winning architect who has designed this structure. All that we need now is all the permitting and maybe another $50 million. But all of that will come. It will come. And that atrium will be a place that will be intergenerational, interdenominational. It will be a place where people meet from all across the physical community. And as we can see from the Zoom community at the same time, we're going to experiment now in these next few weeks to figure out how this works. It will be original programming and programming that doesn't exist anywhere else. We've already done 3 such series. One on 50 words of Torah, one on the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and one on prayer. And all 3 have resulted in books, e-books, paperback books. And if you go to Amazon.com under my name, you'll see these books attributed to me, but in truth, they were the work of 40 people or more who would come onto the screens and interact with me. And out of that, we put those books together. So the Center of Jewish Life, what we're doing is creating the virtual center before the physical center comes into being. when the physical center comes into being, we will have already set a philosophy for the institution, trans-denominational, intergenerational, and be ready to move together. Now, our co-host tonight is Base Miami, Rabbi Adam India. Please tell us what Base Miami is.
It's so nice to have you on in person and virtually. Welcome to this weird hybrid space that we're in these days. Base Miami is part of the national movement of, it's called the Base Movement, which is the rabbinic branch and wing of Moshe House. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Moshe House, but it's a program to engage young professionals. Really, it's the post-college demographic of like, what does life look like in a Jewish kind of pluralistic space. Hi, welcome.
Hey.
What's going on? Come on. Oh, we're good. Yeah, just come around over here. Sorry. The beauty of hybrid work. Anyway, Base Miami is, we're under the Greater Miami Jewish Federation locally, and nationally we're under the Moshe House umbrella. The idea is to use the home of a pluralistic rabbi and partner as a central meeting place for Jewish learning and life. We've been doing this work for about 6 years, and we are based here in Miami. I'm really excited to be partnering with both the Center for Jewish Life and Mitch and all of the other players involved in bringing this here. Yeah, I'm excited to see how this unfolds and how we can do this together.
Beth David programming is very often older generational. You can already see that the generations are mixed here. So intergenerational is the key. We have one other organization that co-sponsors, that's the National Chavarah Committee. Sue, can you unmute yourself and share a word or two about the NHC?
I'm very excited to announce that the registration for our summer retreat, we're not having a full institute this year, but we're doing a small retreat at Isabella Freeman in Connecticut from August 14th to August 17th or 18th. And registration opened last night. We've already got 30 people registered, and we've only got tops 100 places. So check out at havarah.org. We're also going to be doing 2 weeks of programming in July, just in the evenings of classes. So that's all things to look for at havarah.org. And we've been doing year-round programming, and we're very happy that I called Mitch to see if he'd teach one class. And then he said, oh, sure, come to the class we're teaching. So we've been doing this all year with you for 2 years now. So thank you.
Well, the NHC had its beginnings around 1980. As an interdenominational, intergenerational, egalitarian community, and has these, as a rule, in non-COVID years, institutes 300, 400 people gathering in a campus up in the Northeast for a week. And Wally and I, my wife and I, have been attending 40 of them over the last half century, more than 40. It is a transformational event. So all of these organizations have come together locally and nationally. BASE is a national organization, NHC national, and to sponsor this program. Now, hybrid, we're going to be working with the process of storytelling. Some of you signed on to a Shavuot exercise that another original organization, Ivrim Jews Without Borders, did a Shavuot program that began in Jerusalem and moved by time zones across the world and came through Miami. And when it came through Miami, the Center for Jewish Life was the place that it stopped. And there I did an hour of storytelling. And it was great fun. And it was received well by the 40, 50 people on the screen. So it was great fun, and some of you were there for that. This isn't that. This isn't that. This is more of a process, a process that we're going to introduce and see if we can make it work both in physical presence and on Zoom. It's going to require your active participation. The question is, how do we get active participation from 45 people at the moment who are on the various screens of this MacBook Air that I'm looking at. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Maybe you'll make some entries in chat. I will ask the people that we have here physically first. If you've been participating with Adam and Base Miami, these questions will be familiar to you. If you're in the Zoom world, they will not, but you'll be able to answer them. The answer should be no more than 2 words, 3 words for each question. And what I would ask you to do is to put into chat, and those of you who are present, I'll ask you in person.
You can do both.
We'll do both, yes, if you like.
She's on
or you're on and doing both at the same time. Well, you have to pay twice.
Was it for eye contact through the? It was,
Yes,
right?
it was.
That was very interesting.
That is interesting.
Yep.
Wow.
I was also curious to see who was there, but it was.
I'm going to have to learn how to look at
As
people.
I was talking, I was like, wait, also there are people
here. I'm going to have to learn. I know how to work with Zoom.
So many people here.
Yes, I know that, but I would like you, in a couple of words, please, list the last dessert that you've had. Just 2 or 3 words, the last dessert that you've had. Put it up there on chat, and those who are present can say it. And the other question is quite simple. In 2 or 3 words, no more than that. What is your goal here? What is it that you want to take away from the hour or more that we spend together, and maybe for the next 40 hours if this continues? It could be entertainment, it could be connection to the Holy One, it could be finding a significant other, it could be whatever you like, and you can change your mind later. Now, the base people are familiar with this because I learned this technique from Adam.
What an honor.
So, Charlie, what was their last dessert?
Cookies I had for Star.
So, yeah.
What?
The cookies she had for Stan.
That's great. That's great. And why are you here? What do you want to get from this course?
I want to learn more.
She wants to learn more stories from you.
Yes. Charlie was introduced to me. Charlie is 7 years old. Yes. She knew the curse of blessings before I ever met her. Her father, actually, the curse of blessings story with which many of you are familiar. Her father had told her that story. And
A story has brought us together.
And that was the story that brought the 2 of us together. Please, dessert and what you want to bring away.
The last dessert that I had was baklava, actually. It was really good. And I am here for connection and inspiration.
Nice. Whatever you say is going to be nice. Yes.
My last dessert was called a Aggadah. It's a Brazilian chocolate mousse cake type dessert. And it's really delicious. And I'm here to be a part of the community and learn a little more from you and grab add as much as I can, for sure.
Nice.
The last dessert I had right before I came here was just
Ivy.
Christmas mini thing. And I'm here for a new experience, but I come here and I realize I've learned from you before at David. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
A pistachio macaroon,
Nice.
and it was actually a fundraiser for Greater Miami Humane Society. So it was a brunch. Dogs had their thing too, and I pretty much echo what everybody said here for community, building community. Certainly here because of you, Mitch. I've learned from you over the years, and I love being in your company.
Well, thank you. Most of you know me as a teacher of Jewish spirituality, Jewish spiritual discipline, Kabbalah, the framework of prayer. Those are the things that I teach, and my writing is all centered around Jewish spirituality. There are 2 primary ways of conveying spiritual wisdom. I learned this from my teachers. I learned this from Zalman Schachter Shalomi and Shlomo Carlebach, both of blessed memory. They said there is direct teaching. That means I sit here, I give a lecture on the four worlds and the 10 Sfirot. I give the history of the Kabbalah. I talk about Luria and Yosef Karo, and we can certainly do that. But you don't need a class like that to learn that. You can go online anywhere now and download lectures from much better teachers than I am. You can go online with Danny Matt or Moshe Yedel and find teachers at various levels. So the notion that one is going to invite scholars and residents to synagogues or Jewish centers is really something of the time past. That used to be a good part of my livelihood. I used to travel as a scholar in residence. That's not going to happen anymore. I used to do book tour. That's not going to happen anymore. If somebody wants to read my book in Philadelphia and have a book group, I Zoom to Philadelphia. It's that easy now, and much easier on me. So direct teaching is one way. It's putting out direct light. Now, the other way is by storytelling. And the advantage of storytelling is, whereas a direct teaching has to be gauged at the level of the people who are receiving it, storytelling can be told to everybody, and everybody will grab some element from it. And those who are really attuned to the systems of Jewish spirituality might see more deeply into the story than others. But as long as you're working the process of really listening to and absorbing the story, you get 100% credit. And each person ideally will walk away from a story thinking that the story is told only for me. It was directly for me that story was told. And I heard Zalman once said, "Come, I'll show you how." And he gathered 80 of us in the Chavurah, South Florida at that time, and told a story. And each person afterwards, said that was the perfect story for where I am at the moment. Now, how do we make this spontaneous? If I control everything, if I choose the stories that we work on, then everything emanates from me, and there's astonishing little interaction and less exposure and less spontaneity. Here's an extraordinary thing. The Baal Shem Tov was asked once how he counsels. When a person comes to him for counseling, how does he counsel? He said, I sit and I listen to the person and generally don't understand anything. Those of us who are counselors, very often a person comes and doesn't know why he or she is there and begins to ramble, and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. And says, the Baal Shem Tov says, that person could come back next week and do the same, and next week and do the same. And I'm sure that those of you who are therapists and counselors realize that can happen. And so what I do is I tell the person to take a sefer, to reach up to the wall and take down a book. And they would say, well, which book? He says, any book. And then we would say, open to a page. And they would say, well, which page? Any page. And they would open up to a page and they would begin to read from that page. And it was the perfect page to open up to. The perfect page. And they would study that page together. And as they would learn that page together, they would descend. So the Baal Shem Tov like so, and the client like so, would descend and descend and descend until they overlapped. And then the Baal Shem Tov would have insight into the other person, and then return to the surface and say, by God, what you need is, and then essentially give a spiritual prescription in the terms of meditation or practice that would help that person resolve whatever that particular difficulty might be. So, what I would like you to do, those of you who have risked now entering something in chat, you've risked something. You've risked sharing with 50 people and another half dozen here in person what your dessert was, and also what your intent was in coming from this class. I have 2 books here. These are books of stories. This is Tales of the Hasidim by Martin Buber, both volumes in one binding. You can see the binding is kind of falling apart because I've really used this book. And the other book, these are all Hasidic tales. And the other is this book, which in Hebrew is Sefer Aggadah. This is Adam's copy. My copy is really getting around already. It is a book of all the fables and tales that are in the Talmud and the Midrash. And it was collected by Chaim Nachman Bialik, the poet, and the writer Yehoshua Chana Rabnitsky, and translated by a rabbi in Providence whom I knew, William Browdy. And they're short teachings for the most part. And these are short stories for the most part, very short. They could be only a paragraph long. So this from the big book be rabbinic, and this also is actually a big book, and they're Hasidic. They all pertain to connection to the divine one way or the other. Now, what I would like you to do, we'll work from this one first. And it is in 2 volumes. There's 1 volume, Early Masters, and the 2nd volume, Later Masters. And if you would, I would like you to choose, write in chat volume 1 or volume 2, choose 1 or choose 2, and then choose a page number up to 300. Let's say from 50 to 300. We don't want something from the introduction.
Volume 2 and 36, page 36.
Yeah, and we need this here. 2, page number.
You mean just picking a number?
Oh,
Yeah, pick a number.
64.
64, volume 1 or volume 2?
Volume 2. Yeah.
Volume 2, 64. And let's have a look. Volume 2, 64. It's too long a story. I'm going to go to 65 with your permission. Okay. A story is told. I'm reading now from the translation of Buber's Hasidic Tales. The title is In the Attic. Every night the rabbi, hey Charlie, this is a story. You might as well sit for this one. Okay. Every night the rabbi of Rizhin was in the habit of climbing to the attic and staying there for 2 hours. During that time, his servant Shmulek, who accompanied him, waited, sitting on the stairs. Once the rabbi's daughter wanted to fetch something from a cupboard which was in the attic and found Shmulek sitting there and crying. She asked him, what was the matter? Someone, he said, slipped me a lot of money so that I should let him go into the rabbi, and now he is inside. He opened his hand and showed her the money. Just then the rabbi came out at the door. There was no one in the room. In Shmulek's palm lay a few shards of clay. Wow. Somebody wanted to see what the rabbi was doing in the attic, and Shmulek thought that he had received a whole bunch of money, and this person thinks that he went up there and there was nobody there, and in his hand was shards of clay. Now, there's a premise to this process. The premise is stories open and they never close. So there are various things that one can do with it. I can take this story and I can compare it to other stories and other traditions, that in Hindu tradition there's such a story. I can take this story and I can lay it out according to the spherotic tree and show you all the Kabbalistic inferences. Or I can say that the purpose of this story is to open a door and that there's another story that follows. Have you ever told a child a story, a bedtime story, that was really good? And the child said, more, that's not enough. And then you made a terrible mistake. You said, well, that's the end of the story, the end. And you close the door and you walk away. Well, it's not the end. It wasn't the end of the story. It was the opening to still more stories. And so what this process is we look at the story and we say, well, that's the opening to the story. There has to be more. Where do we go from here? Now, we might say we can look at the story from the point of view of the rabbi. We can look at the story from the point of the view of the attic. What does it mean to go up to the attic? We can look at the story from what it means to be a servant of a rabbi and to be waiting on the rabbi. Wow, something came to mind right away. We just did Shavuos and we did the story of Joshua waiting for Moses at the top of Sinai to come down, and Joshua waiting for 40 days and 40 nights. Well, wow, that comes to mind. We can do it from the point of view of the daughter. And we can do it from the point of view of the person who wanted to be with the rabbi. Wow, there are so many different doors that are opened. Let's see, we have these choices now. We can do it from the point of the view of a rabbi and going to the attic. We can do it from the person who is halfway up there, the shmulik, waiting, attending to the rabbi. We can do it from the point of view of the daughter, or we can do it from the point of view of the person who wanted to intrude on the rabbi to see what it was that the rabbi was doing in the attic. What should we do? What should we do?
The daughter.
Hmm?
The daughter.
We should do it from the point of view of the daughter.
Is that one of the options?
It is one of the options. We should do it from the point of view of the daughter. Notice the daughter's not named. Shmulik is named. The rabbi of Rishon is named. When a person who is not named, that person now requires, assumes a certain nature.
Got a lot of requests for Shmulik. And breakout rooms.
We have a lot of requests for Shmulik.
For Shmulik and for breakout rooms.
Do you know how to do breakout rooms?
I do.
I'll think on the daughter. I'll come back to that. But we'll do breakout rooms of 4. Can you do that?
I think I can do whatever is needed.
We're going to go to breakout rooms of 4 people, and your task is to understand the person who is waiting. What is that person's role? He is named, and what is his situation? I don't know how to do this. Rabbi Gindia does.
Maybe I do.
Maybe
I don't know if I have the feature because I'm a co-host. I'm not.
While you're getting that, can I take a look at the story?
I think you need to repeat it one more time, Mitch.
Repeat the story?
Yes.
Okay, here's the essence of the story.
That's great.
We have a Rebbe, a tzaddik. Now, this is more than an ordinary rabbi. This is a spiritual master. The spiritual master is in the habit of climbing to the attic and staying there for a couple of hours. During that time, he has a servant who goes halfway with him and stays on the stairs so that he'll be there to help the rabbi when he comes down from the attic. We have a daughter who wanted to get something from a cupboard in the attic. And so she goes up the stairs and she finds Shmulik there. And Shmulik is crying. And Shmulik is crying because he's done something dishonorable. He feels that someone has slipped him some money so that he should be able to go up to the attic and see what it was that the rabbi did up there. And when he opened his hand to show the daughter the money, there wasn't any money in his hand. There was only some pieces of base clay. So the money had disappeared. Now, are we going to be able to?
The answer is not at the very moment. Can we now do breakout rooms? I don't know, Jasmine, if you're there, if you can. Yeah, that's a feature that I think only the Center for Jewish.
Okay, we're going to have to learn how to do this.
Yeah, we'll get it for next time.
If
technical difficulties.
Next time, the technical
Maybe
difficulty.
another character is the clay.
And the clay.
I was thinking that also.
And the clay. Inanimate things in stories, as you know well from Disney World, can become animated.
So the transformation.
And we have a transformation. But the essence is also the crying. Shmulik is crying. He's transgressed, or he feels that he's transgressed. And this unnamed rabbi's daughter goes up the stairs and encounters him crying. And his crying is so deep that he feels that, somehow the presence of the rabbi's daughter absolves him, or his tears absolve him of the transgression. And the transgression is wiped clean by the time he opens his hand. And so whatever it was, whatever the agent was that tempted him, that thought he was gaining access to the room, has been nullified. So if I'm looking into the story, I see that whenever we have a daughter who is unnamed, the tradition always equates her with Shekhinah, with the indwelling presence of the divine, which is always available. And what attracts the indwelling presence of the divine would be true teshuvah, true repentance. And so a Shmulik is truly repenting, and so encounters the daughter on the way up, and his transgression is utterly wiped out. Now, the question then arises, what is this agent who wanted to gain access to the attic? That agent is in each of us. That agent is in each of us. That agent is, in our tradition, would be called the Yetzer Hara, would be the inclination to surrender to our appetites. The inclination towards greed or to what is not permitted. That inclination now is on its way up to the attic. Shmuel is crying because he provided access, but his tears absolve him and essentially wipe out the deed. To go into a deeper element of the Kabbalah, there's a notion of to sweeten a verdict at its root, limtok et adin min hashoresh. That means an action was done, Shmulek had done something which was a transgression. Well, how could it be turned to clay? So what happened is between his tears and the agency of the daughter, they went right back to the moment when that evil inclination first presented itself and Shmulek made the wrong decision and reversed the decision. That the toggle switch was turned from on to off. And as a result, all that was left was clay, base material, and no transgression. Now is the hard part. That would be, it's not fair. I mean, I did a lot of direct teaching on that. But the hard part now is for you. Is there a decision that you made where you would like to go back and flip that toggle switch from on to off? Is it possible to do that? Here, the real actor here is Shmulek. Everybody wanted Shmulek. Yeah. It's so good to have you here. Everybody wanted Shmulek. The real action is Shmulek. You're Shmulek at the moment. Each of you is Shmulek. You look just like Shmulek.
We were almost going to name you that. So close.
Yeah. And there might have been, is there some point that you would like to go back and flip that toggle switch so that it was like it wasn't done? Is such a thing possible? If it's a physical thing, is it possible to go back and flip it? Let's use, think in your own, you don't have to put this into chat. It's too personal. But if you can think of something, even a few words that are a hint to you personally, something that caused something to go awry, if I could only go back and flip that toggle switch, what would it be? So first is to identify what that would be, and then we'll explore how to do it.
Do you want us to write it or say it?
No, saying it is too personal. We got too many people saying it. Best to write a few words to yourself. It's not fair. We have real living people. I'm making eye contact with them, and I'm not going to ask them. It's enough that I asked you what your dessert was.
That was a great ice cream.
Yeah, and we had wonderful desserts, Brazilian desserts.
We also had a lot of really terrible answers in the chat. I'm just, as the chat monitor, I feel like low-fat yogurt.
Low-fat yogurt.
That's not the directive.
Let's do a hard one. The diagnosis. How about that? We'll take a hard one. Because the story continues. Shmulek now is crying. He's crying because he has a diagnosis. That's a tough one. Whatever the diagnosis is. Is it possible now to reach back through the chain of cause and effect? And this goes back to Yom Kippur afternoon. You've already seen it. It really does. You remember your teaching?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of miles out of that for you.
And deservedly so. On Yom Kippur, we do teshuvah. When you do teshuvah, what do we say? We say teshuvah, tzedakah, tefillah, ma'avirin et roa hagezera. Repentance is normally teshuvah. That's not the best translation of it, but we'll do it. Tzedakah, righteous deeds, and tefillah, earnest prayer, can alter Margarine, the evil of the decree. In other words, what Yom Kippur is all about is Shmulik at that moment doing teshuvah, saying, I wish I could go back and turn that switch off, and it happens. Now, I don't know if I read to you the first 4 words of the story. The first 4 words of the story is, this story is told. Anytime Buber introduces a story with it is told, it's a fable. It isn't a story that reflects a reality, it's a fable. Many of these stories are stories of the Rebbe's lives, and there's great teaching in those lives. But when it says it is told, it is a teaching fable. And what it's teaching is just what we've done here. Can we go back now through time and flip it so the diagnosis is reversed and whatever it is goes away? Well, that would be changing something in the world of action. There's a different way of changing it. You can change the way in which it's regarded. Change the way in which it's regarded. What it does is it alters the evil of the decree. That's what the prayer is. Repentance, charitable deeds, and prayer alter the way in which the decree is regarded, the evil of the decree. Wally and I once had a group in our home in Pinecrest of cancer survivors. Every one of them blessed their diagnosis. For one thing, they were surviving, so it makes it a lot easier to bless the diagnosis. But in a way, what they were saying was life began with their diagnosis, that at the moment of the diagnosis, they were no longer ever took anything for granted. No matter how small the benefit, it was greeted with a blessing. They didn't accept anything for granted. So whereas we may not be able to alter something in the physical world, we can alter the way in which something is regarded. And the counselor then looks for the toggle switch. I'll give you an example.
It's the shift from the money to clay.
So it's a shift from money to clay.
It's the perspective.
Yeah, Shmulik is going to regard his position and his responsibility differently ever after this encounter. He's changed. I'll give you an example of a toggle switch. I was asked once, the person may be on the screen, I can't remember who it was, who asked me to visit an aunt who was leaving the world. The aunt wasn't part of my community, but when you did a visit like that, a question, I went. And I said, well, tell me about your aunt. And it says, she was a teacher all her life. She never married. She never had any children. Doesn't have any family other than me and my sister, and that's it. And she feels that she doesn't have any children to survive her, and is at an utter loss and despair. So I took that into mind. I went in. I was a woman in elder years. I went, I sat with her, introduced myself. It was a very delicate thing to do when a rabbi you don't know comes and introduces himself. And I said, so tell me about your offspring. You see what happened? The difference between children and offspring? Offspring is it's eha, that which comes out of you. So tell me about your offspring. How many students have you had in your lifetime? Toggle switch, just like that. Just like that. Her affect changed completely. This was a woman who was truly fulfilled. So you look for a toggle switch. I didn't change the fact that she didn't have children. I changed the way in which she regarded it. And of course, she was at a very vulnerable point where that was access to that toggle switch. Do you remember how you finished that teaching? This is a very difficult teaching on Yom Kippur afternoon. You recall it?
Yeah, I do.
Please.
But which part?
I don't care.
Yeah, it's the thought that, right, the line is Utshuva Utfila Utstaka Ma'avir Nedra Agzera. So it's really, you need to understand each of those words. So Utshuva it literally means to return. Like Tashuv is to return, and answer is Utshuva, to returning. So Utshuva Utfila, like what is really Tfila? Tfila is the deepest openings of like our deepest experiences and breaking open our hearts in prayer. Like that's what tefillah is to be in deep communication and like in back and forth dialogue with the infinite. So utshuva, utfila, utstaka, and staka it's charity. That's how we generally understand it, but it's rectifying, it's correcting. Right? It's tzedek tirdov, it's like pursuit after justice. It's really remedying it. So the thought, which I'm distilling there was a lot of build up to this, so go take this as it comes. But the thought is that in the cosmic narrative and the writing of creation and existence, our role and our purpose and our goal is to be sensitive to that divine voice within our own selves so that we can further the continued writing of this divine story called creation. So utshuva, utfila, utstaka, through those lenses, ma'avir and adroa, xera, we get to flip and undo this like evil decree. The evil decree being that we end up not experiencing life the way we are intended to experience life. So it was those three. That was not bad. Just still, right?
That was excellent.
Okay.
I understand this happened on a Yom Kippur afternoon. Adam essentially being introduced to, I didn't know him from Adam, actually, at that point. And to develop that teaching as a challenge for me at the end of it, that, the Gezerah is essentially blocking your future development. And all of that is found in this story too. And that's the profound message to take away on Yom Kippur afternoon, just before Nila, just before the gates close and we finish. That one finishes with uplift.
It's a very interesting, I just said the one thing that the gold, the wealth turns to clay, but like, it's not dirt. It doesn't turn to dirt. It turns to something that's actually usable and like malleable, and it allows things to come forth from that.
It's the basic stuff out of which humans are made.
Yeah. But it's not nothing. It's not dirt. It's not dust. It's not, right? It could have been so many other things, but it's actually something that is the foundation of anything that can come forth.
Wow.
Like its potential and its manifest potential.
Yeah.
It's more valuable than the gold that was there. And it's through the reflection and contemplation.
I don't know what's happening out there in the Zoom world, but I hope you're having fun.
That's good. That's actually a transformation, like this when we go through a hard time.
Say it again, please.
It's a transformation because, as the therapists and counselors might say, that rather than regret the past, grow from it and learn from it, and like the cancer survivors actually became born again in a sense by a switch of the perspective.
I don't know if you were able to hear that. There's a difference now having physical people here, whereas we have, how many participants?
40.
We have close to 50 participants on the screens. The physical people have a benefit. There's much more body language and eye contact. So I'm learning how to do that. But hopefully off of the reflections that we have with physical people and also having a learning partner. What happened after that was Adam and I began to learn together. What choice did we have? It's been a blessing every Monday morning to sit for an hour and open up Meor and I. Also, for a person now in his 9th decade to sit and interact with a whole community of people in their 3rd and 4th decades is also machaya. It makes me younger. So this is a blessing also. Now, one of the things that I wanted earnestly to do was to bring this type of energy to Beth David. We're only a block away, actually, physically from Beth David congregation, as it turns out. And this will happen in the atrium. When that physical atrium is built, we can take programs like this and that emanate from interaction like this and make a template for such interactions so that they can come into existence. Anytime you want to be into the atrium, you come there and there can be a program. It's one of the goals of creating a center. The center means radiant activity. So out of the Miami Center, there'll be radiant activity that goes to, I'm looking at Chicago, and I'm looking at New York State, I'm looking at Massachusetts, Atlanta, people I know who are in distant communities, but out of this center, there can be all that radiant activity. And then I can imagine a time when many of us might take a risk and go for a week at a National Chavurah Institute up in a campus in New England. And then we can create a winter retreat down here with home hospitality because you can't afford the hotels, and then use the space of the center for physical gatherings to sit around tables. One of the things that you can't do readily on Zoom is sing and dance together. And singing and dancing is, I had that great joy here when all the base rabbis from around the country came and gathered, many of them around this table with their partners. And my wife and I came and we sang and we danced together. It was a great joy. Let's see. Do we have questions that need to be addressed?
Any
Yes.
perspective from the rabbi that you want to share? Because does he get impacted by Shmulik coming to his room?
The tzaddik, you mean?
Yes, the tzaddik.
We know nothing of the tzaddik.
Okay.
The tzaddik goes up to the attic,
Yes.
and he's there for 2 hours.
He doesn't witness Shmulik coming into the room, or?
No, it's the daughter who encounters Shmulik crying.
Okay.
Right. And the unnamed daughter. When people don't have a name, they have angelic significance. I think of, the Ish, the person who found Joseph wandering a young Joseph wandering in the desert, not wanting to find his brothers. And it says an Ish, an unnamed man, found him and said, "Your brothers went that way." In other words, wanted to make sure that Joseph had that encounter. That's generally considered an angelic form. A unnamed woman angelic form would be the Shekhinah, the indwelling presence of the divine, symbolically. Um, so the story opens, it's ongoing, and I hesitate to close it. The book now is more precious than it used to be. I've got to make sure that I can find the story again. The finer senses, in Shmulek's palm lay a few shards of clay.
It's interesting, shards. I think shards is glass, right? As opposed to shards of clay.
Again, Mary.
I think of shards pertaining to glass, not to clay.
Oh, to clay.
When you first said that.
Well, I think of pottery.
A broken, so broken.
Right, broken pottery, which shifts it also.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, it's a pun in Hebrew and English. The word clay means a pottery vessel.
So now I associate to Leonard Cohen.
A great clay kodesh would be, that's all right. You have a question? Yes.
I think that I think the shreds of clay. I think it was the shreds of. I think there was shreds of clay in his hands because I think the person who gave him the money tricked him and gave him clay money.
There was never money in the first place.
There was never any money in the first place. He imagined it was money, but it was only clay.
Isn't that really all the money?
Oh,
as I said,
he's probably so excited about his intention, his negative intention, that he believed that that was money because he wanted to do it for free.
So
regardless of the money.
You take Charlie's interpretation and you sublimate it to each person grabs the story wherever he or she can grab the story, and each person benefits from it.
Also, entrance without cultivating the relationship to gain entrance is equally as invalid as the cost of that is the same. Without the ability to really enter the attic, right? Purchasing that, right? You can't purchase wisdom. You can't purchase what comes with that. So it's all right. The transaction of the item, whether it be wealth or the shards of pottery.
It's interesting. Like if money is exchanged for teaching of Torah, it's not permitted. So as soon as money is exchanged, the relationship is utterly different. In Chavrusa learning, whether I'm learning with a person who's learned a lot in yeshiva, whether a person is a rabbi, whether a person is a psychologist or a lawyer, God help us, it's always an equal relationship because there's always give and take. And you never know who takes away more from any learning session. So we've learned together for an hour. When we were doing Zoom classes, it was always an hour. Does this seem like an appropriate time? Have we completed an evening? Can you have there will be a summary. I'll write up a summary of this. God help me, writing up a summary of this, and it will go out as a memo probably on Tuesday to everybody on our list, and we'll meet again next Monday at 7:30, and choose a different story and see how we can process that.
We have to say goodnight to Sophie.
Say it again, please.
We have to say goodnight to Sophie.
Oh, thank goodness.
Absolutely.
Well, Sophie is there in Austin, Texas, and those of us who've been Zooming for a long while always say goodnight to Sophie. Good night, Sophie.
Good night, Sophie.
Good night, Sophie.
Good night, Sophie.
Good
We
night,
love you,
Sophie.
Sophie. Good night,
Thanks,
Sophie.
Sophie. And
Sophie and Sophie.
for those of you who are new to the Zoom community, you're all welcome. You'd be surprised how quickly the community forms. Let's,
Cool.
Great to see everyone.
Happy birthday, Wally.
Keep having it.
Wally's birthday.
I'd make a stream. You should live to 100 and feel like you're 20, Wally.
And then you should have 6 months to yourself.
And Ivy's birthday's up too.
Next week.
Ivy Fran, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Early happy birthday.
Thank you.
It's Mitch, that's right.
how's
You
Sophie?
might not have heard it, but Sophie just said Mitch.
I did hear it. I'm honored. I mean, I haven't seen Sophie in a couple months.
She's missed you. So have I.
Say it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually,
Thank you, Mitch.
I wanted to hear also, but I did.
Thank you.
It's such a blessing.
Oh,
Thank you.
Such
Thank
a
you so much.
To